Hey, I'm Jamie with Guitarist Magazine. Now, everybody knows Marshall amps, but fewer people know that they actually have a cutting-edge studio at the heart of their factory in Milton Keynes. Intrigued by this, we decided to pay a visit. Myself, Neve and Richard from Guitarist Magazine, with the aim of recording a track in a single day at this amazing studio that Marshall have built. Just to make life easy for ourselves, we decided that this track should cover several decades of iconic Marshall tones, one by one, from mid-60s Clapton through Hendrix, Blackmore and Deep Purple, all the way through to Satriani and beyond. So what you're about to see is the film of the day we spent recording that track at Marshall, and we hope you enjoy all the incredible sounds and amps and gear, including a vintage Neve desk, which is a big part of that studio, that you'll see in the video. Anyway, rock on and enjoy.
So this building was the theatre that Jim had built and designed in the early 90s, and it was a great space, and we used to have loads of bands rehearse here, and we kept all of our loan stock here. We really felt that as part of the new direction with the label and the booking agency, that a studio was the way forward. So a couple of years ago we gutted the theatre and started building the studio. So it's still the same building, still Jim's design, but we've just now got a studio inside it. Well, if you can think it, we've got it from the Marshall line. We've got stuff from the museum that we can get out on special occasions for you. Some of our loan stock, plus obviously you've got the list of what we've got online. We've got every Marshall amp you can think of, we've got here. But we're not prudes. If you bring something else, you're more than welcome to play it. But yeah, no. If you want to play a Marshall, we've got it here.
This is Neve. It started out life as a Neve 8048 from 1974. It was first in Pate Marconi studio in Paris, the AMI studios, and one of its jobs there with Chris Kimsey was Some Girls, Rolling Stone. And it was there for many years. Then it was bought by, I believe, a Japanese bass player who loved the EQ units and wanted to use those. Put it in a warehouse in Burbank, where I'd heard about it. I tracked it down and I got that back into the country about sort of 8 years ago, and I've been rebuilding it ever since. And I've just done loads of mods to it, but I've speeded it up. It's a lot faster desk than it was, so it sounds more like an 8068 in its speed. So drums particularly, and guitars have that edge now, and drums have that speed where your overheads just sound incredible, and you immediately want to put those on the kick and the snare and go, what are we using overheads? And so I'm really, really pleased with the sound, and it's really growing on people, and it's making recording here so easy. You just bung up a nice pair of microphones in the right place, they start to play, and you go, this is going to be great.
The thing that I thought first of all was, right, we're going to need to get some common ground, a theme that runs through this, so that obviously I think that there are certain characteristic sounds that people expect to hear, but I wanted to really spell it out by also having the sections contrast with each other. So essentially I came up with a melody that could be a riff, and that could be arranged in various ways. You know, most of the track it's like a bouncy shuffle feel, but then we come out of it for the sort of Hendrix part, where the swing becomes a bit more incidental rather than the actual fabric of the piece. So that hopefully will suggest to anyone that's ever listened to music from these eras, they'll be familiar to them as much as sort of, you know, hearing a Marshall tone is familiar to people. Hopefully the riff and the style will be familiar to them too.
So Neve, how did the tracking go for the Blues Invasion section?
The tracking went really well. I'd learnt the riff, but as soon as you get in the studio, having learnt the riff is a totally different thing to playing the riff in the studio. So I took a few takes on it just to get one that I liked, and then that was the kind of the intro kind of Clapton-y style riff. And then I played a few chords, which just because Richard had put the backing down, and I replaced a couple of chords on that in my tone. And then I did the solo, which was the wah-wah solo. And it took me loads of takes just because I wanted to get one that sounded like a take. It was just literally that. and we got one that we liked, and it took 25 goes, but they weren't all full run-throughs. They were just, you start it and you cock it up, and then you start it and you cock it up, and then you do full one and you don't like it. Simple as that, really. It went very well in the end. I love this telly. It's one of my very favourite guitars. In my head, it had been 335 all the way, because it was a Clapton-y style blues breakers-y creamy thing. So my Les Paul is out. Mick Taylor's got it at the moment. And I thought it's 335. As soon as I plugged the 335 in, it was wrong. We chose a Marshall 1974X combo, which is one of my favourite combos of all time. I had a small pedal board, which I used my OCD into the 1974X. And the telly just had it. It just sounded. And I used it for every part. I didn't play another guitar on my track other than this telly.
Okay, so this section that I was recording was a kind of meant to be a bit of a tribute to Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix. So although my talents as a guitarist obviously fall way short of that, we wanted to get that vibe. So the amp we put up was one of the hand-wired 1959, so it's 1959 HW, 100 watt plexi, like a super lead basically, for that classic Jimmy sound. Obviously the thing to do when you've got a studio like this where you can turn up as loud as you like is to actually sort of diamond the amp a bit, which is what we ended up doing. Because it's Little Wing, we wanted a kind of univibe type sound for that, and what I used for that is actually a really useful pedal to have in your arsenal, which is a J-Rocket tranquilizer. So I dialed that in, but the secret weapon of that pedal is that it's also got a nice preamp circuit in it, and if you turn up the fat dial on it, you actually get a bit of boost, which is how we got the lead sound. So instead of using a drive pedal, which just sounded like OTT and a bit artificial, I just goosed it a bit in here by turning up the preamp dial on that phaser. So that's a nice trick. It just gave it just that little bit of juiciness, and Adam did some magic on the desk as well and gave me a little bit more compression, and that's how we got the tone. I'm using Neve's 56 custom shop reissue Strat here. Absolutely brilliant for getting the sounds we needed for that. And that's about it really. Again, we're talking about late 60s tones here. There's not a tremendous amount that you want to stick in the signal chain necessarily, because we can go as loud as we like. We can get the amp sounds naturally. And the phaser is just embellishment on that, and the rest is just down to playing the part right. I don't know if you'd agree, guys, but I think the harmony parts are actually one of the more challenging bits we did today, and kind of for an unexpected reason, because I think we discovered that everybody's, even though you're trying to play the thing that's on the guide track, everybody's phrasing is slightly different, and it's really hard to get it locked in, isn't it?
Very much so. I was lucky that when we talked about who's going to take the parts, I said, well, I'll just take the bottom one, not realising it was the easy one, because it's the actual melody, which I didn't realise that. But even then, it wasn't that easy to play it with all the same phrasing, was it?
No. What's your take on it?
Well, I find that as well, because to play it on your own, that's great, and you have the freedom to vary if you want to as well, but having to second guess where someone else is hearing where it should come in, which isn't necessarily a perfectly on the grid thing. Well, going for the Satriani vibe, it's obviously a challenge, always. So we went for 800, JCM 800, which would be period correct. I used a super overdrive to just give it a little extra, and then I would say crossed my fingers. Obviously I couldn't do that. I was mentally crossing my fingers and then going for as many warbles and extreme pinch harmonics as possible and some tapping, but essentially it was about just getting a tone that had enough mid-range and sustain and distortion just to carry the whole thing, so I could play with a relatively light touch.
So this part of the studio, and what we want it to be, is it's going to be a place for young up and coming artists to be able to get in and use pro standard gear without the pro standard costs. We want to be out there to nurture young artists and bring that talent through, as well as it's a commercially available recording studio, and to have top producers and bands that we've already had come through become repeat clients. But the ethos is really, as part of our label and our booking agency, to really nurture young talent and to give it a leg up, especially after the pandemic.